And it's my honor to introduce a very good friend. He said I could call him an old friend, but I'm not that old, Don Cohen.
"20 years ago, Cindy was the political director of the South Bay Labor Council. I was the political director of the San Diego Labor Council. So 20 years later, she's become a rock star, and I just got gray. She is amazing. So my task is to take us to talk about economic power, and I'm going to take us out to the 30,000-foot view and talk about it in a particular way. So let me roll back to the Great Depression. So during the New Deal, FDR passed probably some of the most significant increases in government economic power since that time. Social Security, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Minimum Wage, Unemployment Insurance, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Safety Act, all things that were supported by big movements and bitterly opposed by industry. So I want to give you a couple of examples. So in 1937, the National Association of Manufacturers said this. Now, this is the minimum wage and unemployment and overtime protections, that the Fair Labor Standards Act constitute a step in the direction of communism, totalitarianism, fascism, and Nazism. We hear those in different language today, but we hear the same things. The next one, it does not, okay, so this is about Social Security. In 1935, this was a Republican congressman. Never in the history of the world has any measure been brought in here so insidiously designed as to prevent business recovery, enslave workers, and prevent any possibility of the employers providing work for the people. So the significance of that is FDR won those battles and gave economic power and freedom to millions of people. That's economic power. So before I talk about economic power today, I want to go through a few numbers, and then I'm not going to do many more numbers after that. So just to give us some context about this is about the domestic economy. So these are all last year's numbers. Fortune 500 companies together earn $12 trillion in revenue and $840 billion in profit. Each year, the governments, local, state, federal agencies, spend $6.7 trillion. About half of that local and state. There are 151 million jobs. There are 14 million union members, and $189 billion were spent last year on advertising. And each of those things has a significant impact on economic power in the U.S. So now let me talk about power. And as Maya said, the economy is incredibly complex. The forces are complex, the dynamics are complex. But I'm going to give what I think are the two simple, basic worldviews about how the economy works and where economic power resides. So, and for the purpose of the discussion, I'll give you my definition of economic power. There are probably better ones when you Google them. So, it's the power to determine the shape, the size, and the distribution of wealth and income. That's how I think about it. So, one worldview that we're all familiar with says that there are natural, immutable laws of the market that, left uninhibited, are the ticket to maximum prosperity for all. Choice, competition, the laws of supply and demand are the iron rule of the market that, if disrupted, will stunt growth, create poverty, and a whole lot of other horrible things. So that's Milton Friedman, that's Ayn Rand, that's Frederick von Hayek. They are the most well-known voices, so I'm going to use their voice to paint a picture of that worldview, if I can work this. So this is Ayn Rand, fountainhead. You know who she is, I hope. So wealth in a free market is achieved by a free, general, democratic vote, that's consumption, by the sales and purchases of every individual who takes part in the economic life of the country. The only person who has, it's consumers that will drive all outcomes, period. That's Ayn Rand. For some reason, okay. So this is Milton Friedman. You may know him as well. The great virtue of a free market system is that it does not care what color people are. It does not care what their religion is. It only cares whether they can produce something you want to buy. That's Milton. And I'm pointing at this, and that's really where I need to point it. So this is Frederick von Hayek, who wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom in 1942 that has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. He says, I am certain, however, that nothing has done so much to destroy the, I actually don't know how to say that word, juridical safeguards of individual freedom as the striving of after this mirage of social justice. That's what you all do. It's a mirage. Now, Paul Ryan, who you may know, considers Hayek his ideological guru. These are ideas that are live today. And then finally, to make it fun, bring in Trump. This is what he said: taxes too high, wages too high, we're not going to be able to compete against the world. People have to go out and work hard and get into that upper stratum. And that is not an advertisement for Trump University. So the other view of the economy says that power is defined by a set of power relations, and that the relative power of each, and in whose power they use that, and in whose interest they use that power, determines the shape, the size, and the distribution of wealth and income. So this is John Kenneth Galbraith, and our friend Jared Bernstein are sort of the best proponents of this view. So let me describe the three basic powers. First, private industry, producers, investors, the capital in capitalism. They have the power, very real powers, to decide where to invest, what to produce, where to produce it, and how many people to hire, and how much wages and benefits. There's a real power that they have. For example, when Nabisco moved their Oreo cookie factory from Chicago to Mexico, 600 people lost their job in South Chicago. That's real economic power. Citizens, and then, there's lots of power battles within private industry. Just on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, Procter & Gamble has set up a war room in Bentonville, Texas to battle Walmart over the placement of soap. Second, government. So government has legal powers to tax and spend, to regulate, and provide social insurance. Those things give individuals power. So let me just leave it at that. So if governments had the resources, we could eliminate college debt that traps people for decades. That gives individuals power. Children are healthier today because lead paint is gone, lead in gasoline is gone. They are healthier, that's more power and freedom. And individual workers who have adequate unemployment insurance have increased power in the labor market. Those are all powers that government has that give people and individuals, consumers, workers, power. And the third force is collective bargaining, unions, that give individual workers in unions the legal and enforceable right to institutional power to negotiate over profits and productivity. A collective bargaining agreement is private regulation. Now, a lot of us know the labor movement's smaller today and less powerful, but millions of people are still covered by collective bargaining agreements. Real economic power comes when unions set standards for entire industries. And there are lots of folks working on new methods of collective bargaining now. So if you accept this basic view, simple view, and if we are to right what I think we all believe is terribly wrong with the economy today, then we have to fundamentally rebalance these relationships so that the power is aligned with the public interest. Now let me go to the ground quickly, because I only have a few minutes left. So the powers that Maya is talking about, that Cindy are talking about, local governments have enormous real legal powers to change power relationships. And these are the 7 powers. I'll run through them quickly. Procurement. Governments spend over $1 trillion in the purchase of goods and services, about half at state and local level. Land use. Every day, city councils and others are making decisions about zoning and land use, things that have effects on affordable housing, transit, jobs. Proprietary power. Governments own airports, ports, conventions, and other things that gives them power as landlords. Economic development and redevelopment. We give out lots of subsidies. That's power we can have to change the relationship and the outcomes. Police powers, that's the term that's regulation. So when we pass minimum wage laws, we are using the police powers of the state to regulate. Spending. Local governments spend $1.8 trillion a year. Parks, libraries, police, fire, everything, all that. And then employment. Local governments sometimes are the largest employers in their regions and have the opportunity to set standards for the regions and provide opportunities into good jobs for low-income folks, for ex-offenders, for returning veterans. These are all real powers that people like Cindy, Maya are using, and we can do better. So let me conclude by rolling back to this picture. So if we think that, if we look at power this way, then it's pretty clear what the 40-year attack on government and unions is all about. It's about changing these basic power relationships. So taxes, collective bargaining, regulations, they're all about getting in the way of private decisions. So let me conclude, let me show you a couple of quotes going the wrong way. No, that's by Galbraith on the importance of these two, of worldview. So first, the emancipation of belief, he was a progressive economist. The emancipation of belief in the Hayek-Friedman view, is what he's referring to, is the most formidable task of reform and the one which all else depends. The next quote. The power of the corporation depends on instilling the belief that any public or private action that serves its purposes also serves the purposes of the public at large. So he's right. Distrust in government affects everything we do. It's used in every effort to prevent the things that the social and economic and racial gains that we want to make. And I believe we can turn that around. I'll finish with one simple idea on how to start. When we talk about the what, the minimum wage, the housing, the stuff that Cindy talked about, affordable college, we get lots of support. So now all we have to do is also talk about the why, and that's about economic power. Thank you.